Hey everyone, it's Jack, and I've been thinking about season 17 just because I really like it. I like it. As we move further away from season 17, especially after season 18 has aired, the reception has middled out to fairly positive, with people just enjoying the cast overall. The challenge performances sometimes left a lot to be desired, and while the judging was good for the most part, there were a couple really questionable choices that they made. For me, I can look past the issues of the season because I think the storytelling here is at an all-time high, especially taking into consideration how nonsensical the storytelling was in season 18. I'll be honest and say that season 17 is my favorite season of the MTV era, which might be controversial. Seasons 15 and 16 objectively do have better moments competition-wise, but I think Drag Race is at its best when we can get a good competition episode alongside storylines that have built up on a season and had great payoff. And what fits that category to me is the villain's roast of this season, which me personally I believe is the best episode of the MTV era and maybe the best episode of modern Drag Race. Make sure you like and subscribe, follow my social media and my Patreon, and allow me to explain further. The Villain's Roast is episode 10 of season 17, which means it occurred 2/3 into the competition, especially if you don't count the Lollapalooza that happened later. Around the episode 10 mark is a very pivotal point in the competition to establish the finalists, start to root out the queens who are struggling elsewhere, and wrap up the story beats for queens who may not fall into either category. At this point in the season, there are 8 queens left, with 6 queens who have a challenge win, some with multiple, and 2 queens that are seemingly falling behind with no challenge win. This was immediately established at the top of the episode, and any fan of Drag Race who's watched more than a couple seasons should have their alarm bells going off and look at Lana and Lydia for this week's episode. When the editors leave in queens talking about placements or wins in the season, it's often a clue of what's going to happen in the next episode. Before knowing the results, this could be a positive or negative thing. Pointing out queens not having wins in the competition, they can either live up to that and win the challenge, or they can crumble under the pressure. The other major thing that was set up at the top of the episode was Lexi being upset that Jules won the previous week. They were both in close contention for the win, and Jules pulled away with it, which hit Lexi hard and made herself get in her head. Something common that will happen in this episode as well. I guess we should talk about all the major players of this week's episode while we're at it. One of the reasons that I love it so much is that each of the queens, outside of like Sam Starr, they all add to the storyline of the episode and make it so complex and entertaining. Coming back to Lexi Love, what was established is that she's getting in her head over not winning the challenge after being so close, to be so close to a win after thinking she had a breakthrough and then not getting that win. It really got to her, and you could feel that in this week and throughout the whole competition basically. To add insult to injury, the queen that she lost out to in the design challenge now has a lot of control in picking the order for this week's challenge. Lexi just really wants to do well, and she has the talents to do it, but she's her own biggest critic and she has the inner saboteur. The queen who has a lot of control this week to pick the order is Jules Sparkles. She's coming hot off a win, and though this week's challenge isn't in her repertoire as much, because she has the power to choose the order, she can use that to her advantage. Jules is a very sweet person who wants to appease everyone while still looking out for herself, and ultimately trying to balance both of those things was a detriment to her, but we'll come back to that later. One of Jules's closest friends in the competition at this point is Ariete. Ariete is another queen who struggles a lot in comedy, and this is basically public knowledge to everyone. Lana and Lydia, as mentioned earlier, are both in the spotlight to see if they could live up to winning a challenge. They are 2 more queens who have also struggled with comedy, and with this week's challenge, it doesn't look that great for them. Plus, Lydia is coming off from just being in the bottom, which almost means she has double to prove that she still deserves to be here. Then there's Anya Nerve, who had a little tiff with Jules at the beginning of the season. There was no real tension after that day, but the show didn't really go on to establish them having any relationship. And finally, there's Susie too. I mentioned earlier that Lexi has an inner saboteur, well she also has an outer saboteur in Susie. Susie doesn't do anything deliberately to get into Lexi's head, but there's just something about Susie that really gets Lexi to compare herself to her. So with all the major players established, let's talk about the challenge that they're about to do. Like a lot of people, I move through life very fast and often put off important things related to my health. The thing that I was putting off was getting some blood work done, which I do think is important to do. But just last month, I was able to sit down and book that appointment through today's video sponsor, ZocDoc. I put off these appointments because I feared how complicated it would be and found it easier to just put off the task until it became a bigger problem, which when we're talking about our health is not a very good thing to do. Fortunately, ZocDoc helped me out. ZocDoc is a website that presents 150,000 providers across 200 specialties in all 50 states for a wide variety of needs. The website lets you search and compare local in-network doctors, see actual appointment openings, and click to instantly book a visit, gathers reviews from real patients and detailed doctor profiles, and you can do all of this while it's free to use. I like that I'm able to find a doctor that takes my insurance and go through the process online instead of getting ping-ponged back and forth on the phone. And once I got to the actual appointment, I was able to check in really easily and free of any complications. ZocDoc takes the complications out of setting up appointments and connections, which allows all of us to be way more conscious of our health. Taking care of your health just got easier. Head to ZocDoc.com/JackFed to get started and check that appointment off your to-do list. Also linked in my description. Thanks to ZocDoc for partnering with me and helping all of us take better care of our health. The Drag Race roast is my favorite challenge of the show for a lot of different reasons. I don't know if it's because it always occurs at a pivotal point in the competition, or if the challenge itself just has a lot of weight to it. It's probably a little of both. The roast to me is so entertaining to watch, not only because I just love the format of jokes, but also there's just no place to hide when you're on that stage. You're at that podium alone, having to present jokes that you wrote yourself, unless you're on All-Stars, and there's no real way that you can mask your performance. There's so much pressure when going into this challenge, and I think the people who excel, I look at them as winner contenders. And I also think the roast is the perfect challenge in a storyline to boost queens who may have been struggling. Because the entire set rides on their shoulders, it creates the perfect redemption storyline. So like I mentioned earlier, Jules was given the power to create the order for the roast. And this is where she tries to appease everyone, hearing everyone out on where they want to be placed. And after the list was created, everyone was at or at least one place next to the place that they requested. Unfortunately, this is where the conflict starts. Lexi and Arietti had an issue with how the placements were done, even though they got what they wanted. Mostly because they thought there was an implication that Jules was trying to sabotage them. Lexi was put right at the end, but the queen right before her was Susie, and Jules put herself after Arietti. In this moment, Lexi believes that Jules is playing mind games with her by putting Susie before, and Arietti is upset because it seems like Jules put herself after because she knew that Arietti was gonna flop. For the Arietti situation, Jules later admits that that did cross her mind when she was making the list, but it wasn't the only thing that she took into consideration. As for the Lexi-Susie situation, I don't think that really crossed Jules' mind as much. So here Jules is trying to do her best appeasing everyone in the room, and she does a pretty good job, and yet some people are still upset. This causes other people in the room like Susie or Anya to start getting upset on behalf of Jules. Not as much comes out here, but the running argument for Anya and Susie is that if you're funny in the roast, it doesn't really matter where you go.
Where you are placed in the roast does not matter that much. How you personally are affected by where you place in the roast matters a lot.
I do believe there are some strengths to going first or last or after someone who did bomb, but you can't really calculate that, and at the end of the day, if your jokes are funny, it's going to be a good set and you are going to be successful. So for Arietti and Lexi to immediately be on the offense, it's almost like they were preemptively deflecting any of their bad performances onto Jules because Jules was the one that was supposedly sabotaging them, when in all reality, they just weren't confident and they weren't in a good headspace, which is not good for a roast. So tensions are starting to rise as they are writing their jokes, and then they go into a coaching session with Michelle and Whitney Cummings of all people. If there's one thing that I wish I could change about this episode, it's probably Whitney Cummings as the guest judge, but you know, there's only so much we can do. The advice from Michelle is good, and they're further establishing who may be doing good and bad in the challenge. Queens like Susie, Anya, Sam are really excelling, but that's kind of to be expected. Lexi, in a low-stakes environment, shows that she does have the joke writing abilities, and queens like Arietti, Lydia, and especially Lana are critiqued pretty hard.
Showcase my silly personality.
I got zero silly from Lana Jarrett.
But one of my favorite organic moments that happens here that you don't really get in these rehearsal type of settings is when Arietti chooses to do something a little villainous on the villain's roast episode. She knows that she's going right before Jules in the roast order, so she decides to steal two of Jules's jokes. It's a very dirty thing to do, and when people were watching it in the moment, they were really upset for Jules. But watching it back now with a ton of hindsight, this is just such an awesome moment. I feel like we haven't seen someone try to majorly sabotage someone else this much in a long time. And whether Arietti was trying to make a good TV moment or not, it really became one, even though it wasn't even addressed by the judges later on. After the writing, we come back to the workroom the next day and we catch up with where the queens are. Lydia mentions staying up all night and having a sleep-deprived confidence going into this challenge, and Arietti and Jules, who have been next to each other all season, are now being split up because Arietti is moving stations. Jules tries to apologize one more time, but Arietti is already gone and the tension in the room is thick. Once Arietti moves, Lexi confides in Lana and Susie about how upset she is with the placements, kind of ironically saying to Susie, you know how much you messed me up, and she knows how much you messed me up. And there's truly nothing that Jules could do about someone else's saboteur when it wasn't her intent to really mess them up, which Lana and Susie bring up to Lexi, trying to reason with her. Then Lana crosses the imaginary makeup boundary and goes to check on Jules, which causes everyone to start talking, and Jules tries one more time to apologize to Arietti, while at the same time not really playing into what Lexi is saying, explaining in a really funny confessional.
I could care less about how Lexi feels right now because I gave that bitch what she asked for.
Then Anya starts to add her 2 cents, and we see that her and Jules are sitting together. Two queens that previously weren't on the same page are now on the same page, and Anya is a big defender of Jules throughout this whole episode and Untucked. I also love the little kumbaya statement that Susie tries to do to lower the tension, which right away is met with frustration from Arietti.
I hope that when we get
to the stage that our energy shifts because I want this to be a great roast.
I love this part of the episode because it shows that no conflict is going to be resolved until after the challenge. We saw other disagreements earlier in the season, for example, Lexi versus Anya over the spray paint thing, but before the runway even happened, they were able to resolve it and it became a footnote. Showing here that there is no resolution to all of the negative energy in the room, it creates a tense environment for one of the most important challenges of the season, and ultimately I think it makes the roast even more entertaining because there's so much riding on it. Is Lexi going to be able to get out of her head right after Susie performs? Will Arietti do as bad as she thinks she's going to do? And if she does bad, will Jules be able to capitalize off of it? Will Lana and Lydia be able to redeem themselves from comedy challenges of the past? Will Samstar have any effect on the narrative whatsoever? And I think the biggest question, are the jokes that Arietti stole from Jules going to come up in this roast set? Everything has been laid out so perfectly, and I think very rarely are there this many moving parts in a single episode. So finally, we get to the actual roast of the episode with Anya opening up with a solid set. Then we get to Arietti, who does indeed flop in her set. One of the good things that Whitney Cummings did have to say in the critiques that I do agree with is that if you're expecting yourself to not do good in a challenge or just a task in life, you're setting your potential low and you're more likely to do bad in that thing. So while a lot of people did expect Arietti to do bad, her telling herself that is only going to be working against her. And something else that worked against her were Jules's jokes, which I find really funny. I once compared it to Daya copying Bosco's answers in the season 14 Snatch game. Both of them were sinking, and just because one person was grabbing onto another person's shoulders, it doesn't mean that they weren't both still going down. But I don't think Arietti thought these were the best jokes ever. I think it was just a way for her to get back at Jules and get in Jules's head as well. And that plan does work, with us getting a hilarious confessional for all the wrong reasons.
Oh my god, she stole my jokes. Oh my god, she stole my jokes.
This is a really big moment of panic for Jules, and the moment is met with the editor putting in every single sound effect that they could find. Jules goes up and doesn't have a great performance, definitely shaken by Arietti taking the jokes, but I'm not sure how she would have done even if the jokes weren't taken. So after two really shaky performances, Lana is up next, and in this episode, she wasn't really set up for the most success. She got a really bad critique from Michelle in the run-through saying that she gets zero funny from Lana, which is not something you want to hear going into a comedy challenge. Unlike Ari and Lexi, who were expecting to do bad right out the gate, Lana took it as a challenge, and I'm happy to say that she slayed the roast. Really great jokes and a really good sense of who Lana is. Like I said, something that can only really come out in a roast. Right after Lana, we have Samstar, who I've been poking at this whole video because she just doesn't have a lot to do with the narrative, but she does have a really great roast set with a lot of jokes that were on the fly.
She owns the stage, much like her family owned my ancestors.
Please give it up one more time for my longtime family friend.
And right after Sam, we have Lydia, the other queen who was on a downwards trajectory in the competition. And once again, I'm happy to say that she had the best set of the night with some of my favorite jokes of all time. She had the perfect level of self-deprecation talking about where she was landing in the competition, which allowed her to bounce back in this challenge. Her Mormon jokes were genius, and of course her oscillating fan joke is so creative.
I'm a really, really big fan, is what Mistress would say if she was dressed like an oscillating fan.
They did a really good job hammering home and setting up that Lydia is not good at scripted comedy, but we've been presented in the past that Lydia has a really creative mind, and if she's presented with free range, she can succeed at the challenges. Something else that I find so interesting about the storytelling of this episode is that it's not framed around the winner of the episode. Because after Lydia, we get a good set from Susie that was expected, and then Lexi does okay, but is definitely in her head, and lands low because of that. Lydia's win serves as the B-plot of the episode, something that's still important and has just enough to make it really satisfying, but outside of little tips in the rehearsal or a confessional or two, we don't hear too much from her. It's the perfect misdirect because the subversion of our expectations of Lydia and Lana makes for a really satisfying conclusion to the tops of the episode, even though we don't get to see too much of it, because so much of the episode is focused on the bottom three of this challenge. After the roast, we get the Who Wears Short Shorts runway, which is alright. It gave us some really memorable looks, especially Susie's with her makeup. And after the runway, we get to the critiques where Anya and Susie are called safe. So let's pop over to Untucked because the critiques don't really matter that much. From what we saw, Anya and Susie had safe performances, but I think they could have been justified to be in the top, but sending them back in Untucked together was the perfect two to recap what happened this week. Neither of them are directly involved in the conflict, but both of them, especially Susie, can be felt. So for them to recap how they feel, it's almost like the audience surrogate. We hear so much of their opinions and why they side with Jules, which is the editor's way of saying that we should side with Jules in this situation. I also just think that Anya and Suzy are a really underrated dynamic because I think they mutually see each other as the frontrunners of the competition and they could just have a good time. The other queens come back, Jules expresses that she is upset at Lexi for saying what she did on the runway, and she also leads to one of my favorite moments in any Untucked. It's not like Suzy ate up the roast and won the roast. And then we see Suzy respond to that makeup with the analog horror RuPaul red in the background.
It's not like Suzy ate up the roast and won the roast.
Yeah,
No shade. Like, she's not like she ate the roast up.
I mean, had it good.
And Jules didn't really continue because she was so upset, but Anya speaks out on her behalf, basically recapping what hasn't really been said out loud. If your jokes are funny, you're gonna be good in the roast, it doesn't really matter where you're placed, they shouldn't be mad at Jules. And this is where Lexi starts to cool off and understand that it's mostly on her for messing up. Ariete though still gets mad at Anya, feeling like she's inserting herself in a conversation where she doesn't belong. But Anya's justification is that Ariete left her friend and then Jules came to Anya, the connection between Jules and Anya eventually building them up to the top 2 of the season.
Our friendship has nothing to do with you. Has nothing to do with you. When you left your friend,
Oh my
she
god.
sat next to me.
We see how Anya and Jules have fought, made up, and then eventually found success together. It's just awesome to see so much continuity and pieces being set up for later as well. Moving forward in the Untucked, we see Anya and Lexi kiss and make up, and this is why I can never really dislike Lexi on the season at all. While she's often in her feelings, in the same episode she'll snap back out of it and be like, oh, sorry guys, I was just a little upset. It makes it easier to understand and root for her, even if Drag Race may not have been the best choice for her to do in this moment. By the end of the Untucked, we have Ariete and Jules sort of making up and just being like, okay, let's go out there and give them a show. Haha, Jules, I did steal those jokes and I got in your head, right? Yeah, you did, girl. Let's go lip sync. There's no major resolution here because the moment is still so raw. But after the show, I do believe this whole conflict is just water under the bridge, which is a good thing. Popping back over to the main episode, we see Lydia get her win and the redemption from last week and comedy challenges in general. Lana is also celebrated this week, which is good. And Lexi avoids the bottom with Jules and Ariete now lip syncing. It's the classic Drag Race tactic of seeing conflict happen in the workroom and then making them resolve that conflict in a lip sync. Sometimes the placements are very shoehorned in, like with Tamisha and Candy, but I think Jules and Ariete both had a reason to be in the bottom here, and because they were just the central focus of the episode and made for the most satisfying lip sync possible. Jules dominates on the main stage to Beyonce's Yaya, and Ariete is sent home on a villainous note, but a note that I think we can all agree was really entertaining. The drama and storyline of this episode flows so well together. Each beat and action of the queen stems from a previous action of another queen, a lot of it coming back to the order that Jules decided to go with. And the drama here is so much more gripping because it's interpersonal tied to the competition as opposed to the competition overtaking everything else. The showrunners will sometimes push the drama onto the queens, but in a moment like this, the relationships between the queens are what's taking foreground, but the competition is still in the background as a pressure cooker pushing these queens to make these decisions. Every person here makes sense, and even if you don't agree with the actions, you understand why the person did them. Ariete stealing Jules's jokes, it was a messy thing to do, but you understand why she would come to that conclusion and why she did it. They also set so much up earlier in the seasons with the relationships. We've been hearing little rumblings all season about how Lexi is irked by Suzy, Ariete and Jules have been close the entire time, Anya and Jules don't have the closest relationship up to this point, and hell, we'll even mention the Lydia and Corey relationship, which was mentioned multiple times in this episode, in the roast, and right at the top. All of them had major shifts in this episode for one reason or another. Whether it's brought to the foreground, relationships become strained or strengthened, whether there's redemption in a relationship because the other person was sent home. It's all shifting around in this episode, and I think the showrunners could see that, and the editors really sold it. The episode has a great challenge, big redemption for some queens, and gripping conflict. And it's an episode that I can watch back so many times, and it's my favorite of the MTV era. That's about it for me today. Thank you so much for letting me talk about one of my favorite episodes. I also wanted to give a shout out to my tier 2 patrons, and my tier 3 patrons who would all eat up the roast and win the roast. Frankie, Shira, and Steely. I'll see you soon with another video.